Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books, and I'm so glad that you are here with me. I'm also going to tell you about a Fibre Arts retreat that I was at all last week. It was at the Fox Bay Retreat Center on Lake Laberge in the Yukon. I will link their website below if you want to find out more about Fox Bay Retreat. This was organized by the Northern Fibers Guild in Whitehorse, of which I am a member, and so is my sister Simone. So it was nice to spend a week there with her and a dozen other wonderful women. There was time during the retreat to work on our own projects or do whatever we wanted to do, walk in the forest, go canoeing, that sort of thing. I included a little clip at the very beginning of this video of what it was like when we walked down to the shore next to this retreat lodge. That was actually the only place where we could get a little tiny bit of cell service, not all of the time. It was LTE, not 3G, so most of my apps on my phone wouldn't work, but I was able to send text messages, so I was happy about that. The other thing was, it didn't bother me as much as I thought it would not to have internet access for a week, and not to mention limited electricity. There were generators that we used to create some power, but we had to limit their use, and they didn't have a lot of power. So, for example, not enough power to run a toaster or an iron, but LED lights, that would work. There was a propane stove, propane fridge, and a wood stove for heat. Yeah, it was lovely. It was such a great getaway. I finished knitting this hat that I'd been working on. I'm not going to put it on, but I am going to show you. It's knitted side to side in garter stitch with short rows, and it's the first time that I have done garter stitch grafting, and even I can't even tell where the join is. I have to look on the inside to see where I've run the thread, because it ended up being quite invisible, and I'm so happy with my hat. I also participated in a half-day eco-printing on felt workshop and a full-day tablet weaving workshop. So I will include some images from these activities at the end of this video if you want to see more about that. This is the piece of felt that I printed on, and I'm going to make it into a zippered bag, I think. And I haven't finished the woven band. I'll show you that when it's done. Now, the big event was a 3-day workshop. So all day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with a textile artist named Bettina Matskun. It was called The Poetics of Landscape. I am going to link Bettina's website down below. I didn't finish the big final project in Poetics of Landscape, so I will show you what it looks like as of now, and then when I do get it completed, I'll show you on my channel. But I did do some smaller projects that I can show you. I don't have them here. I'll pop them in. Anyway, I had such a good time. Oh, it was... I'm so glad that I went. I had a really lovely time. Bettina Matskun, by the way, she contributed an essay to an anthology that I talked about way back in January, Sharp Notions, essays from the Stitching Life, and it's edited by Marita Daschel and Nancy Lee. I will link that video in the description box down below, in case you missed me talking about it. Bettina is an amazing, amazing artist, so I feel really lucky to have had the chance to work with her. And I mentioned that we were at Lake Laberge. Some of you might know the Robert Service poem, The Cremation of Sam McGee. That's the lake. That's in the opening verse. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was the night on the marge of Lake Laberge. I cremated Sam McGee. Of course, that was stuck in my head every once in a while I was there. One thing I did not do was much reading. So I've got 5 books that I finished since my last video, and I will tell you about those. First is an audiobook, Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammad, and the audiobook is read by Nadia Albina. Now, I picked this up for 2 booktube events that are happening in September. Framed in September, the art-related readathon that I am co-hosting along with Elizabeth of Bouquins and Books, Hannah of Hannah's Books, Greg of Another Bibliophile Reads, and Heather Gregg. And this audiobook also ties in with Shake-Timber that's being hosted by Jason of Old Blues Chapter and Verse, his wife Kelly of Books I'm Not Reading, and Nicole of A Day in the Life. Oh, I always forget her channel name. The information will be linked down below. Isabella Hammad is a Palestinian British writer, and in this story, the central character and the narrator in first person is Sonia, an actress who is a Palestinian British woman, and she returns to Haifa to visit her sister Haneen. So she's there for a bit of an extended stay. She's getting over something that happened in her relationship in England. And she becomes involved with theater production of Shakespeare's Hamlet. It's done in Arabic and it's performed by Palestinian actors. Their plan is to have this production take place in the West Bank. So many times as I was listening to this story, I was remembering what Judi Dench said in the book Shakespeare, The Man Who Pays the Rent. And I talked about that one, I think in my last video, recent video anyway. It's the relevance of Shakespeare. No matter when his works are performed, they're relevant to the times. And this is certainly the case with Hamlet. You know, I could see the connections. And since I just mentioned about the art readathon framed in September, I thought I'd tell you about one little section in the book where the theater director, Miriam, says that she believed there's a real conduit between politics and art. Now I'm going to be paraphrasing and shortening the text of the novel, but I just want to tell you about how Sonia, the narrator, says that Miriam freely applied her cynical tone to the cultural life of Ramallah. So on this particular night, she's extemporizing that there's a risk that art might deaden resistance by softening suffering's blow. And the narrator said, well, let people enjoy their art. What's the harm? And Miriam's theory, which she presented as truth, is that When you read a novel about the occupation and feel understood, or watch a film and feel seen, your anger, which is like a wound, is dressed for a brief time, and you can go on enduring a bit more easily. She says, you might feel a kind of flowering in the chest at this sight of your community's resistance embalmed in art, some beauty created out of despair. All of this means you are less likely to fight the fight because despair has been relieved momentarily. Something to think about. I don't know if it's true or not. The novel has a slow to medium pace, and it did take me just a little while to get into it. There's a lot of small details. Like, for example, Sonia mentions that her purse strap got caught in the door for a little bit as she was stepping out of a taxi. So, this sort of moment by moment recounting of the small things in life. You certainly get a feel for everyday life in the West Bank and how it differs from place to place in Palestine, and also the inexorable quality of being in occupied territory with the military, the Israeli military, always there obstructing movement, and also the constant actions of resistance. I really enjoyed this book, and I think it's an important one too. Next is a Canadian book, French-Canadian book, The Party Wall by Catherine Leroux, and it's translated by Lazer Lederhendler. I picked this up because of the project that Jolene and I did together, polling people about the best Canadian books of the 21st century. This was one of the 20 French-Canadian books that were nominated as favorites out of about 352 books, titles that were submitted. And I did make a video about those 20 books, so I will link that down below. I started reading this just to get a feel for it, and I knew that I had to read the whole thing. It's interconnected short stories that truly do form a novel. It won the Governor General Award for translation. The stories have all these pairs of siblings, of twins, of things that are divided in half and then joined to make whole. The connections are quite surprising, both within each story and then also how one story connects to another. It is set in the future. So, for example, in one story, there's a character who is the 36th Prime Minister of Canada, and currently we are on Prime Minister number 23. There's a lot of dry humor, big ideas, the what ifs. There's a focus on social situations or cultural situations, and so the character development is limited to the sections in time, the portions of their lives where we see them. Yeah, this is more a book about exploring ideas. It has a slightly fantastical, playful kind of element at times, and that reminded me of the writing style of Heather O'Neill. So if you like her stuff, definitely try Catherine Leroux. In one of the stories, there's a situation where someone has to either forgive or learn to live with the actions that another person took during wartime. And I love this sentence. Not everyone has the luxury of growing up in peacetime. Just to give you a bit of a flavor for writing, I'm going to read to you from a section where a mother is trying to figure out how to explain to her young son about how there aren't these giant scales that balance out good and evil. So this is just her thinking about it. The world is an unjust place where the good go bad from never being rewarded, where the truly wicked are very rarely punished, and where most folk zigzag between the two extremes, neither saints nor demons, tacking between heartache and joy, their fingers crossed, knocking on wood, every person split in two, each with a fault around which good and evil spin. There's a tie to the Yukon because a woman is in a 565 kilometer foot race through the Yukon, and she's talking about how you hit the wall of exhaustion, and walls come up pretty often in here, walls that divide, walls that are a connection between rooms, walls that protect. And this leads me to talk about the next book, also by a Canadian. It's a children's nonfiction called Walls, The Long History of Human Barriers and Why We Build Them. It's by Gregor, Craigie, and it has art by Arden Taylor and also some photographs. I talked about Gregor Craigie's adult nonfiction, Our Crumbling Foundation, How We Solve Canada's Housing Crisis recently. This book is aimed at ages 9 to 13. Adults can probably glean some things from it. I like the photos better than the illustrations, but I've always been less fond of digital illustrations. This shows a walking path that crosses Hadrian's Wall in England, and it mentions the picturesque sycamore tree standing next to the wall won the 2016 England Tree of the Year award and has become one of the most photographed trees in Britain. These little factoids are a delight to me. I really like this about the book. Here's an example of a photograph showing the Theodosian walls in Istanbul today. And in this image, you can see the city walls of Constantinople in the digital art, and they are compared to some other city walls. Another interesting fact has to do with the Servian Wall in Rome. Some parts are still standing, and there's a picture of a part of it that goes by the busiest railway station. And I learned there's even a section of the original wall that's located in a McDonald's restaurant inside the station. This image of the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, I don't think really does justice to what the memorial looks like, but maybe that's just me. I had heard about the rabbit-proof fence in Australia, but I did not know that there's also a dingo fence, which is 5,614 kilometers long. So the fence was designed to prevent flocks of sheep from dingos. And it's been called the world's largest ecological field experiment because it divides Australia into two giant ecosystems, one with tens of thousands of dingos and the other with almost none. So these dingos, they're a kind of wild dog, and they're the last large predator left in Australia. And this dingo fence has let scientists test how dingoes threaten the reptiles, wallabies, and other animals that they hunt. It was assumed for a long time that dingoes threaten small animal populations, but recent research suggests it might be the opposite. This may be because the dingoes reduce the number of foxes, which live on both sides of the fence and are also a predator of wallabies and reptiles. Plant life is also more diverse on the side with the dingoes, probably because there are fewer kangaroos to graze on the grasses when there are dingoes to hunt them. So who would have thought that there would be so many interesting things on the topic of walls? This book I am also counting for the Framed in September readathon because it's about architecture. And this next book is for Straya September, the Australian readathon that's hosted by Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. It's called A Kunwinjku Counting Book, and the author is Gabriel Maralngurra, who is an Aboriginal artist, and Felicity, Wright. And since it's all about art, I'm also counting it for Framed in September. Look at these beautiful end pages. You can learn a lot about the animals in Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory of Australia. And you can see the X-ray style of art. This book is also intended to keep the Kunwinjku language alive, the language of the Bininj people. And so there's text, dual language text. And I love that at the very end, there's also information about the ancient tradition of rock art that dates back, some of them over 15,000 years, and then how this kind of art is created, first by making a background, then an outline, then the internal organs and backbone and so on, which is why it's called X-ray art. And then lots of cross-hatching is added. And there's detail about how the cross-hatching tools are made from either reeds or kind of eucalyptus, whether they're intending to make fine lines or thicker lines. So lots about art, lots about animals and nature and traditional foods. Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. Loved it. This is my last book. It is a reread for me. It's called Entangled Life: How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures. It's by Merlin Sheldrake. I listened to the audiobook read by the author. This guy is a biologist who is so passionate about fungi. You can't help but feel his enthusiasm and share in his joy and amazement. He does things like take a fermentation bath in a huge pile of white rot fungus. He's in there for 20 minutes and then describes what it's like, feeling the heat of it and feeling slow cooked by the radical chemistry going on with these fungi. He also consumes magic mushrooms under clinical observation and talks about his experiences there. There are so many places where fungi offer solutions to big problems that we face on this planet. So an example is a fungal treatment for the virus that is causing massive die-off of bee colonies. And as a matter of fact, in Party Wall, because this is set in the future, there is mention of a woman who misses bees, that there's no longer any bees around. Fungi to the rescue. In another example, so they say in Mexico City, used diapers make up between 5 and 15% by weight of solid waste. So they found out that oyster mushrooms can grow happily on a diet of used diapers. So over the course of 2 months, diapers lose 85% of their starting mass as long as the plastic outer covering is removed. And this is compared to about 5% in the fungus-free control groups. And there's lots of other good news stories. I liked this passage. Sheldrake talks about how a mycelial network is a map of a fungus's recent history and is a helpful reminder that all life forms are in fact processes, not things. The you of 5 years ago is made of different stuff than the you of today. If you like to read popular science and just about the world around you, I highly recommend this book. Let me know if you have already read it. The reason that I picked it up a second time is because I recently read a picture book, Mushroom Rain, by Laura Zimmerman and Jamie Green, and it just made me want more mushroom information. So it was about 4 years ago, the first time I read it. And this second time, it feels like some of the parts were entirely new to me. I hadn't remembered all of it. So I got so much joy from it and exciting information. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching. I always appreciate hearing from you. So please say hello in the comments down below and stick around if you want to see more scenes from Fox Bay Retreat Center and some of the activities that we did there. Until next time, bye for now.